What we do here at Big Wills Outfitters is we take people on kayaking excursions on Big Wills Creek. Good day, I believe the afternoon storms are going to leave us alone. Kayak fishing is the best way to fish in my estimation, because you're so close to the water, you are in the environment. On the taxonomy report for the red-eye bass, the Micropterus cusi, Fisher Creek, this little stream, is the habitat that's listed on the taxonomy report for that species. We're crossing that creek now. You can see how small it is. Pretty important little stream, though. We're in the Big Wills Valley right now, and I have lived my entire life either in the Big Wills Valley or just over the ridge there in Little Wills Valley. This creek was like almost always brown, always. But this valley back then was pretty much all row crops. It was all, soybeans, millet, sorghum. The sedimentation then was even worse than it is now. So there's been improvement in my lifetime. And I'd much rather continue that improvement than to roll it back.
My name's Keith Johnson. I'm managing attorney of the Southern Environmental Law Center in our Birmingham office. The Clean Water Act has successfully protected waters of the United States for 40 years, and now that protection is in jeopardy. It's extremely important to me because it directly affects water quality all over the state that I grew up in and love. I mean, I grew up, as many of us did, in the South, playing in these streams and these creeks, these wetlands and rivers, and it's one of the largest environmental issues going on in our country. It's extremely serious for the South and all of our resources, but really for the nation. And it's identifying what's the jurisdiction and the reach of the Clean Water Act.
For many, many years, primacy over water pollution control was in the hands of states. But by the early 1970s, that wasn't enough. The states basically, for the most part, were doing a fairly lousy job. 70% of all industrial pollutant discharges were not controlled whatsoever. And the 30% that were basically controlled in a rudimentary fashion. And Congress in 1972 just basically threw its hands up in the air and said, enough is enough. This is a mess. Too many of our streams resemble cesspools flowing to the ocean, and declared that this is a national problem that needed a national solution.
But we had rivers catching on fire in Ohio. We had massive fish kills. Pollution was rampant, and the public was finally fed up with it. And so we passed the Clean Water Act.
The original bills that were introduced basically said we want this to apply to all navigable waters as well as all tributaries. Basically, the conferees decided that we want it to be even broader. We recognize that water moves in hydrological cycles, and you got to control pollution at the source, even if it's way upstream in the headwaters. And so they defined navigable waters as all waters of the United States.
So WOTUS, or Waters of the U.S., are our streams, lakes, creeks, etc., all across the country. And recently there's been an effort to take away one of our most prized resources, which are ephemeral streams. Basically, ephemeral streams are headwaters that may not look significant just looking at it straight on, but they comprise most of our waterways. And so by removing them, you're removing a huge resource.
The current administration announced as one of their priorities that they wanted to cut back on the jurisdictional reach of the Clean Water Act. And to do that, they have now proposed a rule that would basically eliminate any ephemeral stream from coverage, including all the wetlands adjacent to those ephemeral streams. And they would cut out a great many intermittent streams from coverage under the Act. Now, if you add ephemeral streams together with intermittent streams, that's 60% of all the stream mileage in the country, in the lower 48 states. So that is really a significant bashing of the protections provided by the Clean Water Act.
So in this picture, we have two different streams. The one on the right is a perennial stream, which is a stream that flows year-round, and the one on the left is an ephemeral stream, which currently looks dry because it hasn't been raining at all. And these two streams in this left picture are actually the same two streams in this picture. And as you can see, the ephemeral stream is actually flowing with water, and that's because it had just rained. And so when you see a stream like this, you may not think it's very important, but after a rain event, you could see that it's clearly serving a function in the ecosystem. So right now we're kind of in the flat areas. Now we're kind of starting to get more into the headwaters. If we take a closer look, you can see at all the different ways that this ephemeral stream is actually being utilized. I mean, you have ferns, you have moss, you have different grasses, you have different kind of fungi, and you see different kinds of insects. And so the argument that basically says that, oh, ephemeral streams serve no function, they're only dry beds and they don't host any kind of wildlife, just isn't true. This small little area, there's thousands and thousands of areas like this that host this kind of wildlife. And while they may be small, they're vitally important to our ecosystem.
All of our waters are connected. It's like capillaries in your body that lead to larger veins. It's gonna affect those larger veins and those larger rivers. So if you're destroying wetlands upstream or you're destroying the smaller streams upstream, it's going to affect everything downstream.
Congress did not define specifically what a water of the United States was. That led to a lot of inefficiency. The administration in 2015 promulgated a new rule which defined waters of the United States very broadly. So it made the act cleaner, more understandable, and much more efficient.
So the Clean Water Rule clarified the jurisdiction of the Clean Water Act after thousands and thousands of comments and peer-reviewed studies. And a majority of those comments, a vast majority of those comments, were in favor of more protection. And that outlined what the Clean Water Act was, what streams, what rivers, what wetlands it protected.
I'm in Alabama. I'm fairly conservative, fiscally and things like that, and I'm no huge fan of the government. But it should not be a partisan issue on whether or not our water is clean. That's ridiculous. We can't, as a conservative, you can't let someone else take that issue because it's your issue too. The rivers of Alabama are the single greatest resource we have. Millions of dollars are generated every year by fishing and recreation on the waters of Alabama.
As a wildlife biologist and a hunter, protecting this property, to me, it hits me right here. I'm a certified wildlife biologist and I manage private hunting plantation. I'm hands-on in God's creation, looking at how He managed it and trying to help curtail where man's messed it up a lot of times. That's my passion of it. Having the water flow like it's supposed to be is essential to hunting because that affects natural places like this Oxbow Lake, where ducks come to rest, come to feed while they're waiting the winter out to go back to breed in the summer. Preserve some, conserve some, and use some is kind of my philosophy. For instance, if you did something to the river out there, or if you did something just on this little slough, I would hate anything to happen for the environment and the loss we would have. But two, I make my living right here. And then three, the hunting. That hunting is part of who I am and what I do.
Throughout our whole state and throughout the nation, a rollback on the Clean Water Act is going to severely affect all the people, industries, and wildlife that rely on that water.
This is our farm, the Shipman Farm. We have lived here for 22 years. My husband was born and raised on this land. I would say to the politicians in Washington, D.C. that it is imperative that the small farmers have access to clean water. I am USDA organic certified. For us, if our water start running dirty, that would shut us down completely. We are now required through FSMA to have 20 water tests per annual at the rate of $30 per test. So it's not cheap to get these water tests done. If I fail one water test, I fail my inspection. It's just that important. Because those are what they call crucial criteria, and water is at the top of the list.
One has to understand that taking away protection for those upstream waters, the ephemeral waters, many of those intermittent streams, and wetlands associated with them, is going to have a tremendous impact on the downstream waters. And if you sever that connection in terms of protection, you are actually really severing much of the strength of the Clean Water Act. And that's what the administration is trying to do, regardless of what the science demonstrated.
Well, this particular river shares the same kind of problem that a lot of Alabama and other North American rivers are threatened with, and that is excessive sediment loading and excessive nutrients and sort of the chemical pollution that washes off the landscape from our urbanized culture. Critters that live in this water clean that water and are almost always impacted by sediment settling out and smothering the habitat that they need. For me, this is as much home as home is. When I turn over rocks and find little critters, to me, they're somebody that I've met before and know a little bit about, and it's just a happy feeling to know that those little guys are still there. So you can see that these rocks are just covered up with life. All kinds of snails and caddisflies and mayflies, all of whom are doing their little chore, cleaning up the river. So there are a lot of different kinds of caddisflies in the river. This one here is a fingernet caddisfly, and it makes this very long and curved net that's usually in slower moving water than this. This is kind of fast water for one of those. But food particles wash downstream and go into the mouth of the net and then get caught by the net, and the larvae just kind of walks up and down along the net and scrapes food off the wall of the net to feed. So filtering materials out of the water that they feed on. We are a biological species. We do not live in this world independent from the earth. We're something that relies on the earth. We rely on the aquatic wildlife in this stream to clean the water. We might be able to clean this water if we run it through reverse osmosis, but that's wildly expensive.
It's a crazy argument to say that the economy is going to be a lot better if this rule is implemented. It's going to make us spend a lot more money trying to clean the waters instead of allowing the wetlands and these smaller streams and ephemeral streams and intermittent streams to clean the water.
And so right now we have a groundwater system for drinking water, and treating that water is about the most cost-effective type of treatment system you can have, and we're very proud of that. If we fill in too many wetlands, we'll obviously sacrifice surface water quality, and you know the whole natural cycle of water treatment is sacrificed. Does that mean that we're taking care of the water quality issues 10 years from now, 20 years from now? And what are our children and grandchildren going to be looking at when they get to our age and look back at what we did or didn't do and think, you know, we have completely ignored and neglected their future.
Wetlands are essentially water purifiers. Think of them as a huge sponge. They form so many functions that every day we may take for granted. And if those wetlands aren't protected, which is part of the thread of this rollback on the Clean Water Act jurisdiction, then our waters are really going to suffer because of that.
Wetlands are critical to the coastal ecosystem. They do a number of things. So they certainly filter pollutants as they come from the uplands, but before they hit the waterway. We have huge weather systems that come through. Nobody is unfamiliar with Hurricane Katrina and with some of the more recent hurricanes that have come through the Gulf region. Wetlands are able to absorb a lot of that energy, that sort of chaotic storm energy, and dampen it down. They are critical to the protection of upland areas, cities, infrastructure, businesses, and homes. Natural areas work better than anything we can construct or anything that we can restore. They are like a flawless machine. For us to make the decision that it's not important enough to protect them when they do all of these amazing things for humans and for the rest of this big ball that we live on is crazy.
One of the problems with trying to hand this back to the states is the fact that about half the states, roughly 25 states, have either statutes or other rules that prevent them from being more rigorous than what federal law would provide. So if federal protection recedes, state protection also recedes.
I was born and raised in Alabama. I understand Alabama. I've fished in its waters and played on its reservoirs all of my life. And the argument that the state should have more power over protection of our water quality scares the hell out of me, because our state agency is one of the least funded environmental agencies in the country. And if we're dependent on our state agency to protect our waters and our reservoirs and our wetlands, then we're potentially in a lot of trouble.
Unfortunately, you know, here in Alabama, ADEM is the most poorly financed state agency dealing with the environment in the entire nation. One has to be really worried about how well they will protect our waters. Moreover, all they can do in Alabama is protect streams. They have no authority to regulate wetlands. That's done exclusively by the U.S. Corps of Engineers under the Clean Water Act. And if that jurisdiction is cut back and recedes, we have nothing to replace it in Alabama. In fact, many states have nothing to replace it with.
It's one of the most crucial environmental battles of our time, and we all have to be engaged.
This land means a ton to my family, and I would love for hopefully future grandchildren to be able to you know, connect with it like I did as a child. You have to keep your roots. You know, you want to grow, but you got to keep your roots, and our roots are in this river. I will be an activist for clean water. It's, you know, it's my life.
Nice. This is why we have to protect these waters. It's beautiful. Sweet. Yes. Let's find the big one.